Let's get it.
That bike right there is a treat to ride.
Oh yeah!
We have a beautiful one today. I get to ride this beautiful 2018 Ducati Supersport. This belongs to my man Mike back here, who's hiding from me right now. Also has a YouTube channel. I'll link it below right here. And he's gonna ride the R1. So Mike gets to ride the R1. First time he's ridden a bike before the 2000s. I don't know, have you ridden a carbureted bike before?
I've ridden a carbureted, but it was a shadow, so it don't count.
It was a shadow, it doesn't count. So first actual carbureted sport bike, I get to ride his beautiful Ducati Supersport. So it's gonna be a fun one. Let's go.
All right, we have a good one today. 2018 Ducati Supersport S. It is a 939cc L twin, because it's Ducati, not a V twin, but it feels like a twin. It rides like a twin. First 30-second impressions on this thing. It is small, it's narrow. I expected this to be similar to a 600, but in Ducati terms. I expected it to be literally just a lighter version of their big bike. It is not. This thing's actually really small. The knee placement, the leg placement feels like a 400. The thickness of the grips and the bars feel like a 400. Everything's actually really, really light. I don't know the weight of this thing, but it's definitely not 400 pounds. I'll look it up. Editing me, weight goes right here. It does feel like it's less than 400 pounds, and I'll verify that once I go back. But everything is fairly beginner friendly. It has more power, it has a lot of torque. It says 60, 68, almost 70 foot-pounds of torque, and you can feel it. Just a little quick revs, it kind of gets up and goes, and you can tell that the acceleration starts as soon as you start to actually rev it. Whereas on 600, you give it throttle, it starts to rev, but it doesn't feel like it's going anywhere yet. On this, you give it throttle, it starts to rev, and it feels like it starts to move. You feel the little bit of input between, you know, 15% throttle to 20% throttle. You feel that, and the bike shows it. Whereas on a normal 600, you give it an extra 5% or 10% throttle to kind of get yourself going. The bike does it, but you don't necessarily feel it. It's kind of just like the speed goes up magically somehow. Sounds good. I think this is a factory exhaust, and it's a nice little level of thump. And if you've ever experienced anything with a twin engine, they have thump, and this definitely has it. It's very reminiscent of the low end of a Harley.
Man, this bike is an absolute pleasure to ride. It is beautiful. It is really smooth. I think it's a full package, but here's my reaction to hopping on the bike for the first time and moving it around traffic pretty slowly.
Low speed feels pretty peppy, honestly. It has 68 foot-pounds of torque, I'm pretty sure is the number, and 110 horsepower. So more torque than a 600, but slightly less power than a 600, but not by much. And you feel it at the low end. It reminds me of the MT-07. It has a lot of pickup. I haven't gotten on it yet, so I don't know how well it carries, but the low end is very torquey, and it doesn't take a lot of throttle input to get the bike going and get the bike moving. It flows very nicely. At the low end, we're at 3,000 RPMs now. When you give it a little bit of throttle, just like any twin, you can kind of feel it kind of to itself. It's very interesting, and this is a twin thing in general. At the low RPMs, you feel a thump and you feel a heavy vibration when you get on it. And then as you rev it out, it starts to smooth out, and that's true for most anything with a twin. That's L twins, that is parallel twins, V twins, they're all the same. That low end grunt on a twin is kind of just, it has a little bit of vibration at the bottom. Rear brake is stiff. The lever pull is actually pretty stiff, but it does stop. It's not aggressive. I'd like a little bit more stopping power in the rear, but the lever feel is on point. You hit it, you know exactly where you are, and you can kind of keep mashing it past that, but it's quick to engage and then progressive on the pressure. Front brakes are firm. It's a Brembo radial master. There's a little bit of sponge at the beginning, and then you start to grab and you can oscillate in the brake pressure. So there's a little bit of nothingness at the front, and then as you get into the brakes, you can actually feel them, and you can modulate it very well. There's just a little bit of sponge at the beginning. It's still braking, just very soft in the feel on the hands. But it actually does. You can press it very lightly, start to shave off a couple miles an hour. For 5-10 miles an hour, just a little light pull, it starts to do it, and then after that, you feel it very well. You brake, the bike dives forward, and you can modulate from there. Outside of the initial low-end vibration that this bike has on takeoff, it is actually fairly smooth. You can feel that vibration in the bike, but it doesn't transition to the bars, and it doesn't transition to the pegs very well, which is a good thing, which means the bike is smooth. Like, you can tell the mirrors and the visors vibrating, but you yourself don't feel it in your kind of contact points. You can kind of tell in the tank, but other than that, where you're giving the bike input, you don't feel it. It is actually fairly smooth. You feel a grumble, like a little rumble, just a little vibration, but nothing upsetting. It's definitely not as aggressive as other twins, especially the American variety. And the looks, man, this Ducati red is bright and beautiful. It's very reminiscent of this color that I love dearly. It is called Milano red.
Let's take a break from the Ducati for a minute and let's sit down and talk to Mike about his experience on a first generation Yamaha YZF R1.
Man, I tell you what, it's an old bike, but I've been riding it and that bike does not seem, it doesn't ride like an old bike. It rides like I test drove a Aprilia RSV4 2023. Man, I'll be honest with you, that rides better than the 23 RSV4 standard.
Better in what sense? In terms of like comfort or in terms of how the power is delivered?
Both.
Okay.
So with this, it seems like once you get it, well, they're both very linear in the way they go. But I felt like this was doing exactly what I wanted it to do. Where the Aprilia, it was manufacturing what I wanted it to do.
Okay.
If that makes sense at all.
Absolutely.
And I think it has a lot to do with the carburetor.
Yeah, the carburetor, or not being adjusted from what you're doing to the throttle to what's happening on the throttle bodies itself.
Yeah.
Because on there, you'll literally give it 20% throttle, 30% throttle, and it'll always give you slightly less than what you're giving it. Where here, that's it. You give it, you give it something, and you get exactly that.
Yeah.
Let's continue with some more thoughts on this beautiful machine.
The bike is very darty back and forth. It's very even. It's nice and friendly. It moves back and forth with ease. Quick shifter. It's quick. It gets the job done. It's nice and smooth. You can feel it clunk and fall into the gear, and it just kind of keeps going. It's butter, honestly. It's actually less smooth than the S1000 that I rode, because with the S1000 you can't even really feel the bike fall into the next gear. This one, you get a solid like thump, like you can tell in the bike there's a I don't know, there's like a pulse when you actually hit that next gear, and you can tell that it's in there, whereas the S1000 was so smooth, like you can't even feel it. All you see is the RPMs just drop. This gives you a confirming clunk into the actual gear. And it is an auto blipper, so we're in 4th gear, drop it on the way down, and you can not feel it as much on the way down, honestly, but it falls in, you can tell it's there. You don't need to downshift. It doesn't upset the bike. You get a little like a little putt, like a little jolt on the downshift, but that seems to be it.
How did you feel about the weight of the bike and its maneuverability? It's an older bike, so you expect it to be not as good as the new stuff, which you already mentioned that's not the case. But how did it feel to you? Power delivery and handling in terms of weight.
So it's not clunky. It's weird to say this about a bike this old, but it's very refined.
Okay.
You know, in the way it distributes the power and the way that throttle handling is just, I don't know how to put it, but it's very refined feeling. You don't feel all these, something about this bike here is, part of its personality is all the bumps and clicks and the, you know, that's just a Ducati. You get on Ducati, you expect that.
Correct.
So when you get on something like that, it feels more refined as you're throttling through it. It's not like a boring refined.
Correct.
Because there's a difference. Now, like the BMW S1000 RR, in my opinion, becomes very boring. Unless you get the tune. You get a Brinks tune on it, it's a different bike. Yeah. But when it comes out of the factory, it's got that between, I think it's 5 and 8 or 6 and 8 or something like that. It just kind of tops out, and then when it hits that power band, it goes again.
I know what you feel. So that's actually where I met him, on BMW demo day, and we were both out actually riding. I know exactly what you mean, because on the BMW, you don't feel it. Like, it's not giving you feedback. The bike is just doing its thing. You give it throttle, you don't necessarily feel a vibration. It's that smooth, not Goldwing smooth, but you still, like on a sport bike, you want to feel something, right? And it doesn't necessarily give you that until the top end, to where it's like butter. That, when you're at the low end, when you give it throttle, since it's a twin, all twins do this, it's not just this, but it kind of gives you a rattle, like it's shaking. As soon as you get into the throttle at 3,000–4,000, you crack it open and it gives you a, and then it kind of smooths out as you go. This, to kind of further what he's saying, I think is more, you feel the bike, you feel the vibration, you know what you're doing. When you give it throttle, the bike matches what you get. The level of vibration, the level of acceleration, the level of noise matches exactly what you're doing on the throttle, and you can tell. So it's like what you give it is what you get, which is different on newer bikes, because when you give it, it doesn't necessarily give back the same thing like the S1000. It's more tame, unless you're at the top where it gives it to you. This, it's like the feel just matches everything.
The clutch on this bike is pretty grabby. So at this stuff, it feels like an aftermarket clutch, or it feels as if it's not a wet clutch. I don't know if it is or not, but it feels like a dry clutch. It has a little bit more grab than what you're used to on the Japanese sport bikes. So that's a thing. The lever pull's nice. Everything is as you'd expect it on a sporty bike, but the engagement itself is slightly aggressive. It took me a couple goes to kind of get used to it. And I ride a bunch of different bikes, so it's very rare that a clutch gets me, but this one just like it grabs really quick. The threshold of engagement is very, very small, even though the lever travel is actually pretty long. Heat. Every time you watch anything related to a Ducati, it is hot. This bike doesn't necessarily feel that hot. Sitting at a red light, I felt a little bit of heat from the exhaust coming up to where you could tell it's exhaust heat, but nothing that burned my legs. But again, it's like 55 degrees outside, hence I got all this gear on. But it actually felt really good at the cold temperatures. I can imagine when it's hotter it'll bother a little bit, but it's only sitting at lights. This bike does not pass through a lot of hot air from the engine to you. On my legs, I'm not feeling it very much. And I know that's the Panigales that people always complain about, and this isn't that. But yeah, temperature feels perfectly fine. Sitting at a red light, the temperature creeps a little bit, but not past the point of uncomfortable or the point where you feel like you're gonna get burned.
That bike right there is a treat to ride. You know, if you've never ridden anything that doesn't have all the bells and whistles, and not bells and whistles, but the technology bells and whistles, try it out. I'm telling you, try it out. But be careful, because if you hit that throttle too hard, you get that wobble, man, you know?
This bike will humble you.
Yeah,
it will.
You get a guy who's been riding since '98.
Yeah.
He's gonna prefer that over something like this, because that right there, that's that raw feel. There's something nostalgic. Nostalgic about it, yeah.
Man, that torque is nice. I'm in 4th gear going 40, and it has pep to go. You give it throttle and it accelerates. It's nice. It's like smooth around town power. It's not too much to where it bothers you and it's kind of like twitchy on the throttle. It's actually really smooth on the throttle, and it's enough torque to not need to use a lot of throttle input. And right here, it leans so nice. It falls over, it's thick, quick shifter works and responds. Honestly, it's a fun and stable bike. Once you get it at that lean angle, it doesn't fight you, it doesn't feel heavy. The entire way through the lean, it feels smooth. So from the middle to where you're going, there's no spots where the bike feels like it resists you. As I've said before, on the thousands, that upper middle portion is a little bit less flickable than when you're already leaned over. So it takes a little bit to get it leaned, and then once it's there, it's nice and smooth. This is very smooth all the way through, and on the back and forth. It doesn't fight you. It really just kind of goes with the flow. It's a nice, nimble bike. I don't know if you guys can hear that on the mic, but you get a nice little pop on the downshift, just a poof. I'm sure that would be a lot more if it was an aftermarket exhaust, but even then, it's still nice.
So that's a cool bike, dude. I mean, I had my reservations, and I have to admit, because one, it was the age, and then when, of course, you told me there was no steering dampener on there, I was like, oh crap, I'm gonna die tomorrow. You would think that it was gonna be a completely different ride, but just like you said, you go gradually into it. It's It's a wonderfully powerful beast. You know what I mean? And I actually think I may go look at R1s whenever I get back to the house on Facebook Marketplace.
Oh man, it's smooth. Honestly, man, this bike, you can cruise 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 RPMs on normal traffic or on the highway, which is about where you are, and it's buttery smooth. You don't feel the vibrations. The bike doesn't get blown around very well. It's stable at speed. The only time where it really does get upsetting if you're not prepared for it is at full throttle, because you get everything.
And that mid-range power is a nice little punch. That's exactly where I personally like to live, man. I enjoy the mid-range of bikes. Just kind of revving through the power band and not getting it to redline with some partial throttle stuff. That's exactly where I like to live. Oh yeah, that is plenty fast, man. That picks up. That's actually more power than I expected. Normally on very torquey bikes, you rev it, and the more you rev it, it starts to dip off in power. That didn't dip off. The power kept going. It's not a crazy amount. It's 110 horsepower, but it's linear and it's progressive. Usually on high torque bikes, the horsepower number is low. So you get a lot of peak up front, and then it kind of just feels like it tapers off. Whereas this one felt more of like your inline 4 power band, where as you rev it, it keeps on increasing. I didn't feel a dead spot to where it kind of like tapered off. Let's drop it into second and kind of give it a good pull and see what it actually feels like. So here we go, 5,000 RPMs in second. Oh yeah! I don't know if I got it all the way to redline, but man, that is quick. That is peppy. It really does. So it feels like an MT plus, like if it had the power at the top end of an MT. I was in 5th gear there at like 8,000 RPMs, and I did not feel the power taping off. This bike literally feels like it can pull all the way to redline in every gear. When you run into twins, a lot of them, they have torque and they accelerate. So the low end, when you punch it, feels really aggressive and it tapers off. This one doesn't. It literally keeps on pulling. It pulls hard, it pulls nice. That's 4th, that's 3rd. That's all the way to redline. This is a fun bike. I would say it's a little bit faster than a beginner bike for sure. It's closer to a 600. It is slower than a 600 because a 600 has that super duper peak at the bottom, but this is a much more full power band. Like from the bottom to the top, there's not a big distinction from low end to top end. Whereas a 600, a true 600, there's a big distinction from low end to top end. This is very, very smooth. I like it. I like it because it's predictable, right? You know what you're gonna get at 4,000, you know what you're gonna get at 5, but you also know what you're gonna get at 8. That is a very nice introduction to a decent amount of power, because 110 horsepower is you know, it's a hefty amount. If all you've ridden were beginner bikes, you're definitely gonna be past the point of comfort for you. That's nice. Let's go 2nd gear, 40 on this nice straight highway. Let's get it. Yeah, that pulls all the way through. That pulls all the way through. Dude, this bike is geared perfect for the amount of power that it has. Wow, like this bike is designed perfectly for what it is. It's light enough for the amount of power that it has. It has enough brakes for the amount of power that it has. It has enough speed to keep you entertained and kind of push your boundaries, because I was like a $135, and it did it so nicely. The quick shifts are smooth, you feel an engagement, it drops into gear, it keeps on going. This bike is very, very well designed. It feels like an entire package. That power band in the middle gives you nice grunt, nice ump. It's a full power band. You still have a good body position to where it feels torquey, but it's comfortable. I'm still upright. I'm still vertical. I'm not leaning forward. My lower back isn't feeling any sort of pressure from stability. My feet are literally under me, so my feet are like midway between my thighs, so my back here, front here, my feet are like halfway through, so it's still a decently comfortable position, but it's very stable and nimble. It's not upsetting in any way. It kind of goes, it does its job. It doesn't feel like it needs more brakes. It stops at the speed that you're going. I slowed down from 130 perfectly fine, and I didn't feel like I needed more. You put it in 6th gear, cruising at 60 miles an hour. This is like slower highway speeds, and it's comfortable. The vibration isn't excessive. You feel the vibration, but it's not excessive. And then you can give it some throttle to pass oncoming traffic, and it has enough juice for that. This is just normal traffic speeds. It feels good, man. This is a great all-around package for a beginner bike. Honestly, I think this is better than a 600 for somebody that hasn't ridden a bike, because it has the torque, it has the power, but you can control it with the throttle, and it's not surprising, because a 600, the power will surprise you because of how different the low and the top end are. This isn't that. This is more of a coherent, cohesive package.
But dude, I just want to say thank you again for allowing me to test ride your bike. It was an honor, and it was a good time, dude. It was a really good time.
First off, you are very welcome, but also thank you in return, because I got to ride that. That is actually the first Ducati I've ever ridden. It is very smooth, kind of what I expected, but not exactly. But it's honestly, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Is it grunty like you thought?
It is. It is.
It grunts, right?
It does, especially at that low end, man. 2,000, 3,000 RPMs when you're kind of going, it really does react to the throttle that you're giving it. I mean, even if you're in a higher gear, it kind of just and goes, right?
Yeah, man, just thank you so much, dude. And I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
All right, man.